give any kind of alerts.
What have you found so far?
Just remains. That's all.
Can you describe to me what you've seen?
Words can't even describe it. It's just unbelievable, the mess in there.
Alongside the search for bodies, there is a search for clues. Detective Bill Levasseur is hunting for any part of the black box voice and data recorders that would have been on the hijacked planes.
Some of the elements of the plane flew all over. I understand the engine was up on Church Street, tire was down on Rector, so we're looking everywhere for any pieces of evidence.
So the black box could be anywhere within half a square mile from here?
Well, it could be here, it could be anywhere. We're just making sure, a thorough search to make sure we don't miss anything.
FBI agents are walking the streets with trash bags, scooping up anything that looks like evidence. It's hard to tell, given the shattered debris.
It was like a scene out of Apocalypse Now, or a scene out of hell.
This iron worker volunteered to help lift the mass of metal, but he's never seen steel like this.
The steel came down, and the pieces that came down actually stuck into the West Side Highway and are sticking up like toothpicks.
That's the shattered skeleton of the Trade Center, but emergency room radiologists told us about the broken bodies that they saw in the first hours.
We've seen the X-rays, we've seen CAT scans and the X-rays of people with crushed heads, fortunately alive, but some pretty bad injuries.
Not even the dead are spared here. At the nearby and historic Trinity Church, graves are buried alongside the police and fire vehicles crushed under the falling towers. This is what's left of an ambulance that was among the first at the scene. There are continuing worries, of course, about the safety of the living. This response team from the EPA is testing the choking air over Manhattan. What concern is there about the air quality for the workers are?
Well, we've been asked to sample for a whole bunch of different stuff, so I don't know that there's any particular concern other than they want to know exactly what there is there, so we'll try to determine that for them.
They want to know what these guys have been breathing for the last 2 days.
Right.
Asbestos, any number of hazardous kinds of materials.
Asbestos is one of the concerns. You'll have to excuse me, I got to kind of get dressed.
It's all right, keep going. That dust has become a kind of message board. Residents who live here are sending wishes to firemen they will never meet or know. Many are leaving these notes on their way uptown, evacuating for who knows how long. Refugees in a city that they no longer recognize.
It'll never be the same. Everybody's devastated down here. It's people just walking around with like these empty looks on their faces. I feel terrible for all those people that died.
Scott Pelley with that story. 2 days after the attacks, as we struggle to try to make sense of these stories with no end, we need stories that do have happy endings to help us digest all of it. Now from Harold Dow, 48 Hours, remarkable accounts of those who've cheated death.
People come from all over the world just to go see those towers.
It showed New York as a superpower, super city.
Just 2 days ago, 42-year-old Phil Bachman and 27-year-old Anthony Christopherson worked together for Bank of America, high above Manhattan in World Trade Center Tower 1.
In July, we moved up to the 81st floor, where helicopters would actually ride underneath us.
They both came to work early this past Tuesday, where it was business as usual.
It's early this Tuesday morning, the 11th of September, 2001.
But not for long.
8:50 or so, I heard a boom.
Together, Tom Kaminsky, Chopper 880.
All right, Pat, we are just currently getting a look at the World Trade Center. We have.
So when it hit, first thing I did was, I got knocked down.
Anthony jumped back up and looked out the window. What he saw horrified him.
Some people, debris falling, a lot of ashes, a lot of fire, a lot of smoke. That was so scary. That's when I started, panicking.
Everyone on the 81st floor ran for the emergency exit and started down the stairs. At first, they made steady progress.
We're on the 50th floor, the 40th floor, the 30th floor. But as we're going down, we're seeing firemen resting. The sweat is dripping off their face, and they're carrying oxygen tanks. And you start to think, are you going to make it?
Just a few blocks north, Phil's girlfriend, Helen Orloff, was at work, watching TV, and wondering the same thing.
I became hysterical, and I tried to call him, and I couldn't get him, obviously. He kept saying that my heart is in that building.
Phil finally made it to the lobby of Tower 1. He was just about free of the building. But then...
What's the other jet doing? Holy f***.
Oh, my God!
That's when the second plane hit Tower 2.
All over.
Lights went out. 3 cops jumped on top of me. One guy gave me his helmet, and I covered my face, and they just said, remain calm.
They were in darkness, the air thick with smoke and dust.
And the cop said, let's get out of here, and he started feeling his way around. Once we saw that bit of light, I don't think anything would have stopped us. I walked out, it was literally a war zone. There was ashes all over.
Right.
There was small balls of fire. There was concrete, glass as far as you can see.
Everywhere.
As far as you can see.
Anthony came out a few seconds later. Again, everyone seemed to be safe. But then...
Oh, no! Oh, no!
Maybe 15 seconds after I walked out, that's when the second tower came down.
And I just turned around.
That's exactly what I did.
And you could actually see it come down. They kept telling us, go north, keep going north, don't look back.
That's when I ran, and if I hold my hand in front of my face, I would never be able to see it.
Come to the light!
It was so horrible.
I got 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and the first building went down.
News photographer Don Hallisey was covering the disaster for the New York Post.
Of course, everybody's running away from it, and I'm a press photographer. I'm running to it.
Hallisey ran towards the wreckage of Tower 2 and started shooting photos, getting closer and closer to ground zero.
And then we heard like this growing, rumbling, and it sounded like an avalanche.
It was Tower 1 coming down.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building that was...
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground. And I'd say like from here to... I was about from here to the end of the partition here.
Yeah.
And I'm screaming, anybody out there? Anybody alive? And my voice was the only voice out there.
How did you get out of this?
Well, I started walking around like in very short steps because I didn't want to trip over anything. And as I said, after about 20 minutes or so, it started to settle and the sun came out. It was like the weirdest thing.
By this time, Phil and Anthony had finally run far enough to be out of harm's way.
And then I finally collapsed, and the EMS was so good. You know, they treated everybody. They just said, sit here. They gave me oxygen.
Kept getting phone calls at my desk, and I got this message, and you keep deleting because and all you kept praying is, come on, God, let me hear his voice. Come on. And then I got, Helen, it's me. The building fell down on me. I'm sorry, don't be mad. I love you. I'm on my way home.
I couldn't see anything. Nothing.
And my whole department started to cheer.
Look at it now. It's just like, it's like nothing was there. Think how many bodies are still there.
But as for Don Hallisey, he's left with anger.
I've never had this kind of hate before. Never. Those son of a bitches. I was saying there better be a hole in the ground somewhere. Because if Bush doesn't do something about this, I mean, this is not terrorism. This is an act of war.
And many share that feeling. The flames have been extinguished, but the fire flared again at the Pentagon. Flames leapt again from the damaged building, which was sliced open Tuesday when terrorists plowed a jet into it. But just steps away, yards away, With that constant reminder to fuel them on, military planners are busy targeting a U.S. retaliation for the attacks. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin reports.
A U.S. official now calls the evidence against Osama bin Laden compelling. And Secretary of State Powell left absolutely no doubt about what the U.S. is planning to do.
At that point, we will go after that group, that network, and those who have harbored, supported, and aided that network to rip the network up.
U.S. officials say they are drafting plans to attack not just bin Laden, but the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan who allow him to operate from their territory, either killing bin Laden and destroying his camps or forcing the Taliban to turn him over. And, said Powell, that's not all.
When we're through with that network, we will continue with a global assault against terrorism in general.
A senior official named the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah, which in 1983 killed more than 200 American Marines in Beirut, and Hamas, which sends suicide bombers against Israeli civilians, as two of the terrorist groups the U.S. intends to go after. And the Deputy Secretary of Defense explained what that would involve.
You don't do it with just a single military strike, no matter how dramatic. It will be a campaign, not a single action.
In the past, the U.S. has launched cruise missiles against bin Laden's training camps and arrested his accomplices in the bombing of American embassies. But Wolfowitz said that's not enough.
It's not just simply a matter of capturing people and holding them accountable, but removing the sanctuaries, removing the support systems, ending states who sponsor terrorism.
Ending states who sponsor terrorism means taking on not just Afghanistan, but countries like Iran and Iraq. And the cost will be astronomical. Wolfowitz said a $20 billion emergency spending bill now before Congress is just the down payment.
Obviously, a significant piece of this is going to be to bring our armed forces to the highest level of preparedness to be able to execute whatever it is the president may ask them to do.
Bodies pulled from the Pentagon arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware for identification, as the Defense Department estimated the total number of dead at 190. 126 people in the building and 64 more aboard the plane. Fear of a further collapse is making the task of recovering the bodies agonizingly slow.
We would all like it to go very quickly, but in doing things quickly, you have a very unstable building, and it's almost at a crawling pace.
It also slows the hunt for the plane's cockpit voice recorder, which could answer so many questions about the final moments.
They thought they knew where it was, that it is, we are close to it, but close doesn't mean a short period of time.
There is no real hope of survivors, but one find did raise spirits. The Marine Corps colors still standing amid the wreckage. Call that a moral victory, but real victory is not going to come as easily as it did in America's wars against Iraq and Serbia. This one is going to be nasty, costly, and long. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
And the death toll, David reported, still stands from the Pentagon. The White House and a united Congress agreed this morning on details of a $40 billion package to fight terrorism and help in the recovery from Tuesday's terror attacks. Our chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer reports.
Congressional leaders were just about to agree on doubling a $20 billion emergency fund that the White House had asked for to help the victims of this tragedy and to track down these terrorists when a bomb threat was received in the area of the Capitol where they were meeting. It came to nothing, but the whole Capitol had to be evacuated. These congressional leaders have been saying it's time to put the country on a war footing, and even before this bizarre turn of events, it already seemed that way. In a Capitol office, scenes unlike anything that has taken place here since World War II. Members of Congress giving blood. In an unprecedented bipartisan gesture, Congress was preparing to authorize $20 billion in emergency funds to help the victims and track down the terrorists. But tonight, House officials said that figure is growing.
I think it's growing.
How much is it grown beyond 20? Is it doubled?
It's pretty much doubled, and I don't have specific numbers.
The president has also asked Congress for specific authority to take military action once it is determined who's behind all this, and he will get that too.
It will be a piece of legislation which authorizes legally the president to take appropriate actions against the perpetrators of this giant atrocity.
Congressional debate is often dry, abstract, about things far away, but not this one. Leaders had to travel only a few miles to the Pentagon to see firsthand what this one is all about and how this money will be spent. They were clearly moved by that trip, but they were hardly back to the Capitol when they found themselves back out on the lawn, standing around and wondering what had happened while police dogs were brought in to search the Capitol for explosives. As we said, that search came to nothing, but it overshadowed perhaps the most important news of the day. They have decided to double that $20 billion appropriation to $40 billion. $20 billion will go just to help the people in New York alone. Quite a day.
It has been. U.S. stock markets remain closed today. In Japan this morning, Tokyo's Nikkei index soared, closing up 395 points, more than 4%. Both the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ plan to be back in business tomorrow or on Monday. CBS's Anthony Mason has more.
The New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ made it official. After testing their systems this weekend, they will reopen at 9:30 Monday morning, while the bond and futures markets went back to business.
On the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, traders tentatively returned to work Thursday.
It was just, I don't know, kind of like going into a dark room and then turning the lights on and looking and seeing what was there.
But there was no panic, and at exactly 11 o'clock, trading calmly came to a stop for a moment of silence. The exchange closed early, but trader Jeff Carter said,
"It was good for us to open today. I think it's a good sign for the rest of the world that, yeah, we can do it. Pretty soon Wall Street's going to be there for them."
After 4 dark days, the markets, said New York Stock Exchange Chairman Dick Grasso, will reopen Monday.
As to our facilities, neither the marketplace itself nor our technology centers, which are split, sustained any damage.
But economists say there could have been damage to the economy if the Federal Reserve Bank had not been aggressive during this crisis.
Just the fact that the lender of last resort is there tends to calm a lot of nerves and make these things turn out to be not as bad as they might be.
Soon after the attack, the Fed made billions of dollars available to banks. So if there was a run on cash by businesses or account holders, the banks would have the money. The Fed's done that before, after the 1987 stock market crash, for example.
What is a little different this time is the speed and the size of the effort and the fact that it's being coordinated on a global basis.
Many foreign banks also had offices in and around the World Trade Center. The Fed has offered help to them, too.
Essentially what the Fed has said is that the financial institutions have a blank check.
And in a crisis like this, that's critical to maintaining confidence and to keeping the economy going. And many expect the Fed to try to further reassure investors and consumers by cutting interest rates yet again, perhaps as early as next week. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
All told, the terror attack on America may turn out to be the nation's most costly man-made disaster. CBS's Richard Schlesinger has more on the cost of rebuilding.
It was hard to find too many buildings that stood out in New York more than the World Trade Center. The tip of the island was the top of the line, where businesses could tower above it all. And even in the midst of the rubble, talk has begun about rising from it all and rebuilding.
Rebuild the city of New York and the World Trade Center to be even greater and more wonderful and more beautiful than it was before.
It would be a mammoth undertaking by any measure. What used to be millions of square feet of space is now millions of tons of wreckage. But the idea of building back the towers is building up support.
I want to rebuild them exactly as they were.
And it's hard to imagine looking at the area today, but former Mayor Koch, another potent symbol of the city, could get his wish. If there's a will, in this case, there could well be a way.
I think the rebuilding of the financial district, the World Trade Center area specifically, is feasible and not only feasible, will happen most certainly.
Robert Hartwig says the buildings were insured, and between private companies and the federal government, the money is there.
We will be able to rebuild New York. We're talking about a Marshall Plan for Manhattan.
A Marshall Plan?
A Marshall Plan.
Like the plan to rebuild Europe after World War II?
That's right. We'll be rebuilding Manhattan.
How realistic is it, do you think, to rebuild
Oh, I think it's very realistic. I think that, once again, the plans are there.
Take the blueprints out of the file?
Absolutely.
Of course, it's not that simple. Richard Anderson is the president of the New York Building Congress.
It's not easy because it's complex at every level. I think you're starting with a $5 billion figure just for some of the core building and infrastructure costs.
But it was the prominence of the towers and their dominance of the city that made them a target for the attack that scarred the New York skyline.
Do you worry about building another target?
Well, but there are so many targets. Isn't the Statue of Liberty a target? Should we take it down and put it in the closet?
Like the Statue of Liberty, the Twin Towers were more than just a landmark, and rebuilding them would prove more than just it could be done.
The priority is to demonstrate to terrorists, you'll never have a victory. We will rebuild.
Of course, several more buildings will have to be rebuilt by the time all the damage is surveyed. In fact, this is turning out to be such a massive disaster that, at least in terms of money, man might have done more damage to this country than Mother Nature. Until this week, the most the insurance industry paid out for any single event was about $15.5 billion for Hurricane Andrew. Robert Hartwig, the spokesman for the insurance company, says they could well end up paying more than that for this week's attacks. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
This week marked a tragic milestone in American history, one of many the nation has experienced. CBS News correspondent Eric Ingberg looks at turning points on the U.S. timeline.
History, for the most part, tick-tocks toward us in increments that produce trends, then maybe slight change. Only a few times in a generation will one day strike like a thunderclap, forever altering America's view of itself.
It's the shock effect when it hits. Everybody stops still. Everybody calls the people they love. Everybody checks to make sure everybody's okay.
October 29th, 1929 was such a day. The stock market crashed. A depression that would spread poverty and fear across the land was to follow.
Most every ship in the harbor has been hit.
December 7th, 1941, the day of the Pearl Harbor attack, brought both war and a feeling of vulnerability Americans had never known. On October 4th, 1957, Americans were jolted from space. It was called Sputnik, and it was the first man-made object to orbit the Earth, made in Russia. It frightened a country fearful of Soviet missiles and brought improvements in the U.S. education system. November 22nd, 1963, was the day America lost a young president to assassination. It was more harrowing than previous presidential deaths, because JFK was the first president of the television age. We were there, mourning someone we knew.
Those images, they felt like a death of a generation at that point. And from 63 onwards, the Kennedy death, some of the spirit of America was hurt.
1968, the assassination of Martin Luther King. It robbed the nation of its main voice for racial justice and severely damaged relations between blacks and whites, as disturbances swept dozens of cities. On August 9, 1974, Richard Nixon was driven from office by a scandal which still reverberates. Americans who had instinctively trusted their officials to tell the truth simply stopped doing so. Veteran Washington correspondent Hugh Sidey, who witnessed many of these days, believes last Tuesday to be one of the most critical ever.
We've been more interested in everything that we can do in our indulgences than the public good. And I think that has to change.
September 11th, 2001 joins the list of days that changed America because our homeland has been violated. When that happens, history teaches, Americans unify. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Washington.
You're watching CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. watching continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America. This is CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. I'm Melissa McDermott, and here are the headlines at this very hour. President Bush will tour the wreckage of the World Trade Center's Twin Towers today. He says he'll hug and cry with rescue workers and relatives of those still missing in the rubble. Mr. Bush has declared this a national day of prayer and remembrance. You're looking at a picture of downtown Manhattan, the attack area, taken earlier this evening. Normally at this time, we bring you live pictures to keep you up to the minute. Unfortunately, rain has hampered our efforts, but we do know that it has not hampered rescuers' effort, as you might imagine, because they've donned orange raincoats and continued to dig. We can tell you that. It is not stopping them. Authorities say a man arrested at New York's JFK airport was trying to get past security with a fake pilot's ID. New York airport shut down again just hours after flights had resumed. In the meantime, U.S. and Philippine authorities raided a Manila hotel today in connection with the terrorist attacks. Police raided the same hotel where a suspect in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing was arrested 6 years ago. Now, some of the other key developments. Our coverage begins with CBS News correspondent John Roberts at the White House.
The nation must understand this is now the focus of my administration. But now that war has been declared on us, we will lead the world to victory.
From the Oval Office today, echoed in the scarred canyons of New York, the drumbeat of war spread across the nation and around the globe. In Congress, President Bush sought authority to commit the American military into harm's way. And he is working the phones, as his father did 11 years ago in the Gulf War, to build a global coalition against the terrorists who shattered buildings and stole lives.
We have just seen the first war of the 21st century, and there's universal approval of the statements I have made, and I am confident there will be universal approval of the actions this government takes.
Administration officials today sent word to America that they will proceed slowly, that this is a long struggle that will be measured not in days, but weeks and months, perhaps years.
I think it's one of the most complex problems that an American leader has had to face probably since the Civil War.
Historian Stephen Hess says that the task ahead for George Bush defies the sort of conventional response that rose out of the last great attack against American soil, Pearl Harbor.
You had a nation united to a common known enemy, able to fight a war. We know how to fight wars. But what do we do in this very special situation where we have to somehow uproot a terrorist organization, stop them from doing these sorts of things before they kill again?
Already there is a heightened state of alert against those who may kill again. The president's motorcade route to a Washington hospital was today lined by police with automatic weapons. The security cordon around the White House again pushed back. Pennsylvania Avenue now off limits to anyone without a government pass. All of this, says Stephen Hess, will have a lasting effect on how America looks at itself.
For the first time in our lives, we feel that we can be threatened in our homes. We can be threatened in the skies overhead. They have reached us. They have reached into Fortress America. And suddenly we have been pierced. And I think that's a profound change in how America is going to look upon the future.
How the president responds to this crisis, the degree of confidence he can restore in a nation shattered, will shape his presidency. There is little argument. This is a defining moment.
This is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
Senior administration officials say that while Osama bin Laden is a suspect, they do not want to act prematurely. There may be other organizations involved, they said, adding they want to understand all the connections, not just one. John Roberts, CBS News, the White House.
And the very latest, we just received word Taliban's leaders insist that bin Laden is not responsible for the U.S. Attacks on the U.S. So again, they are denying that he is responsible for that. We'll talk more about that in a little while. Some of the numbers we're dealing with in the last 24 hours. 4,763, the number of people missing from the World Trade Center attack. 184 confirmed dead in that attack. Parts of 70 bodies recovered. 30,000, that's the number of body bags that Mayor Giuliani is requesting brought to the site. In the Pentagon, 126 people still missing, and that toll is expected to rise to 190. At Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, the grim third night of rescue efforts continued, and as emergency workers risked their lives to help others, there was a rescue. Byron Pitts has the story.
This is Ground Zero. What you're watching is a videotape shot by a fireman. TV cameras were not allowed this close to the scene, but I managed to make my way in.
You can begin to hear, Dan, hopefully those will fall.
At that moment, I was reporting by cell phone the successful rescue of one firefighter. Pulled to safety, then walked through a gauntlet of applause as grown men cried.
They're shaking his hand. I believe the man himself is fine. Right now, they're trying to get a medic to him. He says he's okay. He's telling everyone he's okay.
It was one of those moments these rescue workers live for.
So I just figured he was one of the guys helping out. I didn't think anybody was going to come out here was going to walk out. I figured they might be alive, but certainly not able to walk out.
For nearly 48 hours, men and women, cops, construction workers, and firefighters have scratched and pulled and cut their way through a mountain of rubble that was once the World Trade Center. 1,600 volunteers called in. Thousands more just showed up.
Hey, we need buckets and a couple guys! Buckets!
In the midst of it all, reminders of reality. Inside that orange body bag, one of too many victims. Today, for the first time, rescue teams reached the bottom of Tower 1. These are the first images out, taken by a rescue worker, of the dark and deadly corners that must be searched. Surreal, quiet images, stillness that often ends suddenly.
Excuse me, sir, have you heard what happened?
Twice today, rescue workers were ordered to run when it was feared another building was about to collapse. Besides the two World Trade Center towers, at least 4 other buildings have fallen, and portions of at least 8 others may go next.
We have 4,763 people on the missing persons list.
Today, the mayor of New York City and the governor of New York State took a call from the president.
We will be with you when the United States takes firm and appropriate action to those who conducted this evil.
Aid by the truckload is still pouring into New York City, but anguish is never far behind. That fire department chaplain who died Tuesday was killed as he gave last rites to a firefighter laying at his feet.
Yeah, this is what Michael Church was all about. He said, Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way.
All told, 6 rescue workers had to be rescued, men who had been trapped beneath debris for several hours. As for those buried since Tuesday, the search goes on. Byron Pitts, CBS News, New York.
Everywhere else but New York, grounded air travelers got some hopeful news when the government lifted the ban on commercial aviation, but there are new restrictions. CBS's Sandra Hughes reports.
For the most part, when the FAA opened the nation's airspace, the system started limping back up to speed.
The American air transportation system took off today, a slow process that will demand even more patience from passengers.
I mean, how can you be frustrated? People are suffering, so just deal with it.
A visible reminder from the window of the first plane to land at Newark Airport. After this disaster, air travel will never be the same.
We have taken every precaution to make sure that it is safe to fly in America.
Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta says that federal law enforcement agents will be posted at all airports and will recommend that military special forces should also be used.
It wouldn't take that much more training to put the Delta forces on the airplanes.
For now, no cargo or mail will be permitted on passenger jets. Also, for the time being, the nation's airspace is open to commercial traffic only. No private planes, no charters. One small plane landed without permission today in Mobile, Alabama. The airport was evacuated as a precaution. There was also an evacuation at Orlando's International Airport when a mysterious package was found, a sign that nerves are still raw. Security was so tight in Seattle, each individual car entering the airport was stopped and searched. Still, passengers are eager to get moving again.
Everyone is cooperating, and even if it takes a couple more hours, so what?
The first plane to land at Los Angeles Airport was a flight from Italy, with at least one Hollywood actress on board that had spent the last 2 days in Canada.
I'm telling you, I don't see that people are really going to want to fly.
But what also greeted arriving passengers, stringent new security procedures. In LA, no private vehicles will be allowed on the airport property. Arriving and departing passengers must use taxis and buses. The first people to arrive today were bused to a remote parking lot to meet their rides. Los Angeles airport officials think that they and the rest of the nation will be back to about 50% capacity by the weekend. Full flying capacity possibly by the end of next week.
I wouldn't hesitate in a minute to fly or put my family on any aircraft or any airline operating out of this airport today. I think the system is completely safe.
Safer, say some, because the government is mandating stricter security measures. No curbside check-in, only ticketed passengers will be allowed into the boarding area, and no knives of any kind allowed on board a flight.
That was Sandra Hughes reporting. Yet, despite the increased security, this is kind of an unbelievable story. In Phoenix, 3 Northwest Airlines employees intentionally breached a security checkpoint at Sky Harbor International Airport on Thursday. 2 of them, ground crew employees, cleared the checkpoint with a pocket knife and corkscrew, and a pilot passed through without proper identification. They then turned around and said something to the effect of, "Hey, look what we did." Other developments now. Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien has declared today a national day of mourning in Canada. A memorial service will be held on Parliament Hill in Ottawa at noon. There's also an outpouring of sympathy in Europe. CBS News correspondent Tom Fenton is in our London bureau with the latest. Tom.
Well, good morning, Melissa. At times like this, America is not without friends. There have been gestures of solidarity all over Europe, and there will be more today. The British and the rest of Europe deeply share America's loss. The American embassy here has become a focus of their grief. Flowers and messages of sympathy have been pouring in from both the British and the American community here.
15,000 families, or more than that, are just destroyed for no reason. I mean, it's just real hard.
The British themselves lost as many as 500 of their fellow citizens in the terrorist attacks, and they are deeply shocked at America's far greater loss. In a unique gesture of solidarity, the ceremony of changing the guard at Buckingham Palace became a brief memorial service. The Guards band played the Star-Spangled Banner. A minute of silence was observed. The American ambassador was there with Prince Andrew, who was standing in for the Queen, who will attend a special memorial service in London today. In another gesture of solidarity, America's NATO allies have invoked for the first time the treaty clause that makes an attack on one member state an attack on all of them. If America asks for military cooperation to strike back at terrorism, there will be a swift and positive response. Meanwhile, there are a number of American tourists stranded in Europe. Weary passengers have been camping out at London's airports or have been offered temporary accommodations nearby. There have been no flights to America since Tuesday. Several foreign airlines trying to fly to America out of other European countries yesterday were forced to recall their planes. United Airlines has announced it will resume some flights from London today, but it may be weeks before international schedules are back to normal.
There are plans today for 3 minutes of silence to be observed throughout Europe. And here in London, the focus will be at St. Paul's Cathedral, where there will be a large memorial service. Melissa?
Tom, you spent a lot of time overseas. Does this intense outpouring of support for America surprise you at all?
It's far different from what we often have. It doesn't surprise me, though. In times of need, people rally around. And I think you'll find that when Europeans are asked to help, if there's military action involved, they will help.
And as you said, we mustn't forget they lost some too. Tom Fenton, thank you, reporting from London. Wall Street will be closed today for an unprecedented fourth business day because of the terror attack aimed at New York City. Alexis Christoforous has more on the impact on financial markets both now and in the future.
As America tries to pick up the pieces following the worst terrorist attack in history, Wall Street plans to get back to business Monday morning.
In the course of the next few days, we will, together with the industry, do all of the required stress testing of our systems from an infrastructure standpoint, communications, power.
It's the longest the stock market has been shut down consecutively since the end of World War II, when the markets were closed for 2 days. The bond market did open for business in a shortened session with no disruptions. While some Wall Street firms have lost, in some cases, hundreds of employees in the attacks, they say they're ready to begin trading. But market officials say safety and security issues in the financial district are still too great to allow the exchanges to open. But when they do, analysts expect an initial sell-off followed by a recovery.
There is no indication of panic, so I think that investors will hold up and the market should be firm.
Investors can take some comfort in global markets. Stocks in Asia and Europe stabilized after initially tumbling. Oil prices fell as concern eased that oil supplies would be disrupted. Even gold, the safe haven investment in times of crisis, also dropped. And if history is any guide, Wall Street has come back from other catastrophic events, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the 1993 bombing at the World Trade Center.
In 1863, New York City had the greatest riot in the history of the world, perhaps, and the body count is simply unknown. It was probably in the thousands. And the market promptly reopened, and it happened in the Kennedy assassination.
And with the Fed standing by, ready to pump money into the banking system as needed, market watchers believe, like our nation, Wall Street will also rebuild and emerge a stronger market. Alexis Christoforous, CBSMarketWatch.com.
When you talk about numbers in the business world, you use some of the human frailty because you're just talking business, but then you have to remember people in those businesses that made the markets work also were lost. Cantor Fitzgerald, a major Wall Street bond firm, had 4 of the top floors of the first World Trade Tower hit. 1,000 employees, only 300 survived. Leslie Stahl spoke with the chairman.
Howard Lutnick would normally have been at his desk when the plane hit. But on Tuesday morning, he was taking his 5-year-old son to his first day of kindergarten. Most of Lutnick's employees at the World Trade Center are missing, including his own brother, Gary.
I'm missing 700 families, 700 people, 700 people.
You're missing more than 2/3 of your company.
700 people. And it's worse because I don't know of any, not a single person who got down from the building, not a one. And that is just the most brutal statistic, and I'm the one who has to tell everybody, and I tell it to them, and I tell it to them, and I tell it to them. And
yesterday, you set up a center for the families in a hotel here in New York. What did you say? What happened in that room?
They're all looking for answers, and they look, as if somehow I can know the answers for them.
You're the company that when you ask, was anybody completely wiped out? You're the name. Cantor Fitzgerald. The company. What happens to the company now?
Our business is the bond exchange of the world. And
you may have had the largest stake in American Treasury bonds.
We're the market that all the banks and dealers and all the big names they go to buy and sell their bonds. I mean, last year we did $50 trillion in business.
So the bond market opened. How does it open without you?
I got my people together. There are 275 people who survived in New York. We have 1,000 people in London. And we got them together, and I asked them what they wanted to do. That this is what the Treasury wanted to do, and this is what the Fed wanted, and the Treasury said it would be important for America to reopen.
So you're opened. Your company is operating.
At 7 a.m. this morning, I had 260 people. They never slept. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why. They voted that they wanted to open the market, and they stayed up all night, and they worked every second of every minute. So instead of worrying about the person to the left and the person to the right, at 7 a.m. New York time, they opened the bond markets of the world because they wanted to.
Like so many other Wall Street firms forced out of their headquarters, Cantor Fitzgerald survivors are working in a temporary operations center. Theirs is in New Jersey. Is there any sense in your mind and their minds that this is a way to fight back? I mean, to say, you didn't cripple us, you didn't destroy us, you know, we're not going to let you succeed?
I think there's a little of everything. I think everybody's different. I think some people want to don't let them get away with it. And some people said, I cannot be at home. I cannot be at home. Other people said, I can't think about it. You know, so I think it's everything. I think it's amazing human spirit.
Cantor Fitzgerald's people helped make today's trading orderly, almost ordinary. William Donaldson, former chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, watched the day unfold. The bond market today, apparently there was a lot of volatility, but at the end of the day, things settled. Do you take this as a positive sign, a negative sign, a sign of hesitancy, a sign of lack of confidence?
I think it's a natural sign. I think as I think back onto other crises we've had, I think it's quite natural when there's uncertainty, there's a flight to certainty, which short-term government bonds represent, short-term securities.
The head of NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange announced that the stock markets would remain closed tomorrow for an unprecedented fourth day in a row.
To resume trading 9:30 Monday morning.
But even a Monday opening is iffy. There are questions about whether the downtown area will be safe enough by then. Not only are some buildings still in danger of collapse, but there have been bomb scares around the city. And the markets themselves are still rebuilding their computer systems.
From just a technical point of view, a need to make sure that once the infrastructure of the marketplace is open, that it works. Because nothing could be worse than to open it prematurely and have some sort of system or power failure.
On Saturday, NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange will conduct a full-scale computer stress test. Only if the system works will the Monday opening go forward. If the market's open, what do you think's going to happen? In past crises, people pull their money out.
If we follow past patterns, again, I refer to Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth, there's been a precipitous decline and then a reversal.
At least on the internet, there's already a backlash against the conventional wisdom that Monday will see a big sell-off. Stock market chat rooms today were filled with gung-ho, bullish cheerleading. Please don't sell. If you sell, bin Laden will buy American shares. Invest in America. Even if the markets do open down on Monday, as expected, the mere fact that they're open will be seen by many as a victory.
The major firms of the world, the biggest banks and dealers, they all have issues. Downtown Manhattan is not a place where people are going, and it's not business as usual. The big banks, they all have issues. They're in their disaster sites. So I think Bank of New York lost its main site and its disaster site, so it's in number 3. So, I mean, these are not the kind of business conditions where people are going to go out and try to do a lot of business. What they're there to do is to show that the American financial system is bigger than anything than anybody else can dish at it, and that the collective group of all the banks and dealers and firms like ours of the world can pull together, and they will make it work.
Leslie Stahl bringing us that story. The shocking East Coast terror attacks have had repercussions across the entire nation. Bill Whitaker has more on that.
As the nation watched in disbelief, pilot Jim Bagley of 29 Palms, California, had added reason to be stunned. The FBI suspects the Florida flight school where Bagley trained may have been the training ground for terrorists, too.
There's no doubt in my mind that the air crews were replaced by terrorists who were trained to make this suicide mission.
The FBI has tied the terrorists to several Florida flight schools, including Flight Safety International, where Bagley was certified. Reportedly, some of the suspected terrorists were learning to fly commercial jets there at the same time Bagley was.
But certainly somebody coming out with the commercial level of experience from one of these training programs could very easily navigate that jet after commandeering it and take it back and put it into the World Trade Center.
And when the plane slammed into the World Trade Center, San Francisco businesswoman Melissa Hughes was meeting on the 104th floor of the North Tower. She called her husband of 1 year, Sean, and left this message.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. A plane hit the building or a bomb went off, we don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and he just wanted you to know that I love you always.
He's called 40 New York hospitals and victim hotlines, but has heard nothing of her since Tuesday morning.
I just wanted to wake up and just somehow just have it not happen, have it be a bad dream.
But this nightmare was real.
Let's not blame the innocent.
So again today, Americans of all ages, races, and religions came together, like at this church in Los Angeles, to stand by our values and stand by each other. Like at this UCLA memorial service. But the shock waves are still rippling out.
Deep to right field!
Out of respect and solidarity, Major League Baseball has postponed all games through Sunday. So has the NFL, college football, and NASCAR. Even Hollywood is turning down the volume. The new Schwarzenegger movie about Colombian terrorists has been shelved for now.
We do not tolerate attacks on our citizens.
The reaction to the attack has had some unintended consequences, too. The big Montana wildfires grew even bigger while all planes, even firefighting tankers, were grounded. The tankers now are back in the air. Another unintended consequence? A plane delivering a heart for transplant from Anchorage to Seattle was forced to land by Navy fighters. After some tense negotiations, arrangements were made for the heart to be delivered by helicopter. The surgery was a success. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
It's not just in New York and Washington. All over the country, parents are holding on to their children a little tighter. Many still wondering how to explain the unexplainable. Cheryl Atkinson reports.
For those who were hit so close to home, it was the first day back at school in a changed world.
I think it was really sad. That was really sad because a lot of people died.
200 counselors were deployed to schools in the District of Columbia on a mission to fight fear and grief.
Her fear right now is that it's going to happen again.
Experts advise parents to tell their children it's okay to feel scared.
It's just so scary. I mean, nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened like that in my life.
It's all right to be sad.
It was horrible. It made me want to cry.
And it's normal to feel angry.
I think we should kill them all.
The question of what to tell children becomes even more difficult when the loss is more personal. Leckie Elementary in Washington, D.C. lost a teacher and an 11-year-old student in the plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
30 counselors are at this one school alone to help children cope. They wrote goodbye letters to the teacher, Hilda Taylor.
Miss Taylor, I miss you a whole lot. From Durham.
And their classmate, Bernard Brown.
And how do you keep them from feeling overly fearful or overly sad?
By spending time with them, by encouraging them, by touching them, by giving them hugs.
Children everywhere are in need of those hugs, touched by the frightening images of kids their own age running in terror.
I really can't understand why people did this. If I had been on the airplane, I would be really scared.
My sister told me that on TV she saw like a person with a white shirt jump out of the building.
In fact, if there was one horrible image that seemed to haunt children the most, it was the sight of people jumping from the burning World Trade Center.
A lot of people just jumped off the building, and it was really sad looking at that.
Back in Washington, D.C., proximity poses an added challenge.
It was close to us, that's one thing. Because it could have gone in school, so we would be dead right now.
It's important that by living here, fear not grip them. Saying, oh my God, I live in Washington, but instead, oh my God, I'm a very special American because I live in the nation's capital.
Right now, most of these kids would rather not be so special.
I wish everything was normal.
Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. watching continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America.
Guy would cut the stuff out and let it drop. Even you might be able to let it drop in places and then pick it up, you know.
Okay, the bag, that happened. There's something over there.
It is Friday, September 14th, although some would say it feels like Friday the 13th. I'm Melissa McDermott reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York City with continuing coverage of the attack on America. And here's the latest. President Bush says the United States will, quote, lead the world to victory in the war against terrorism. Today, the president will visit New York, where the search goes on tonight for the victims in the rubble of the World Trade Center. You were looking at a picture from earlier this evening, and here at 3:30 in Manhattan, we are hearing claps of thunder outside, meaning it is raining on the site, but rescue workers continue as they put on their raincoats and continue the dig. Hopefully it doesn't rain so much that they have to quit. And right now, the confirmation of dead stands at 184 in the World Trade Center bombing and could rise to 4,700. The White House and a united Congress have agreed to spend $40 billion to fight terrorism and support recovery and rebuilding in New York and at the Pentagon. U.S. stock markets remain closed today, but will reopen on Monday. Meantime, Standard & Poor's, a leading financial research firm, says Tuesday's tragedy might precipitate a full-blown U.S. recession. The Justice Department now has photographs of all the hijackers. Secretary of State Powell says Osama bin Laden is a prime suspect. The number of missing or dead in all the attacks could top 5,000. Now some other key developments. Cheers went up around the crash site when several firefighters were pulled alive from the wreckage of the World Trade Center. It later turned out, though, that those rescued had not been trapped since Tuesday, rather had gotten stuck earlier in the day, reminding us how dangerous this work is. While searching for survivors, they were trapped, but it was still heartening to the hundreds sifting through the shattered remains of those giant towers. It was another reminder that rescue workers are doing more than giving their time. They are literally risking their lives. CBS Lee Cowan reports.
Anyone down here this morning will tell you that there simply wasn't any time to do anything. Wasn't time to think, wasn't time to breathe. Certainly there wasn't time to mourn. The only thing you could do is run, and if you could, help.
For those inside the World Trade Center, it wasn't just hell on earth. For Bob Fox, it was hell 39 stories up.
It was unbelievable. I was on the 39th floor about 8:45 when a tremendous explosion hit.
Those lucky enough to get out walked out of one danger right into another. A moonscape of ash and debris, smoke and fire, leaking gas, and already the smell of death.
Debris, smoke, all the dust, everything, just couldn't see nothing. And I was praying to God then that, let me get by this now.
Ironworker Tony Cabrera rushed toward the carnage to try and help.
And I seen the second plane hit. And I went into this lobby. And I went into the lobby. I was there with the fire department and everything, and just, it was starting to give away. This and that, pieces of people coming down, parts, and whatever.
Never seen anything like it.
Never.
Rescuers were at a loss. Smoke so thick they couldn't see the damage. The clamor of falling debris so loud they couldn't hear the cries for help. All of it made worse when the first of the Twin Towers came tumbling down upon them.
Go! Come on! Let's go! Let's go! After the first series of explosions, there was hardly time to get in, and those that did were right in line of fire for the next series of explosions.
As the second tower collapsed, Val Coleman had a front row seat to disaster, watching it all unfold out of his apartment window just 5 blocks away.
And a great blossom of flame, a huge red fireball, scared the hell out of me.
Val Coleman was inside the World Trade Center just 15 minutes before the initial attack and remembers the last person he talked with.
A very nice young man, answered me very politely. I left, came back here, and boom, he's probably dead.
And as he sat watching the building burn, Coleman could see tiny black specks near the top floors. They were people jumping off instead of being burned alive.
I must have seen 10 or 15 people come down, one after another.
Off the top?
Off what appeared to be the top.
The bombings today brought one horrific scene after another.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
But rescuers know once they get closer to what's left of the Twin Towers, the images are sure to get worse.
For now, though, some of those workers are having to wait. Firefighters are now starting to get an upper hand on some of the fire.